Hey there, TopFivers. Get ready for a trip into the creepy world of medical practices throughout U.S. history. We've got five spine-tingling tales lined up, and as always, we've included one fictional story for you to guess. So let's dive into these bone-chilling accounts from the past, just waiting to be uncovered.
First story: the Ohio Penitentiary Radiation Experiments, 1951 to 1974. Reason for choosing. This chilling tale exposes the dark underbelly of medical experimentation and highlights the importance of ethical standards in scientific research. Setting the stage. In the mid-20th century, within the confines of the Ohio Penitentiary, a sinister series of medical experiments unfolded under the guise of scientific inquiry. Inmates became unwitting subjects in a study that delved into the effects of radiation on the human body. Players in the game. A. The Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction spearheaded the experiments, exploiting the vulnerable population of prisoners for scientific pursuits. B. Dr. Alfred F. Himwalt, the lead researcher behind the experiments, whose pursuit of knowledge came at the expense of human dignity. C. Inmate subjects, individuals incarcerated within the Ohio Penitentiary who were subjected to harmful levels of radiation without their informed consent. Unraveling the scheme. Under the pretense of medical treatment, inmates were exposed to high doses of radiation, often without their knowledge or understanding of the risks involved. The experiments aimed to study the effects of radiation on various bodily functions, leading to severe health consequences for many of the subjects. Despite protests from some inmates and emerging concerns about ethical standards, the experiments continued for over 2 decades, shrouded in secrecy and deception.
Reflections on history. The experiments serve as a chilling reminder of how ethics can be overlooked in the quest for scientific progress. Using vulnerable groups for research highlights the critical need for ethical supervision and ensuring people fully understand and agree to participate in medical studies.
Second story: the Texas electroconvulsive therapy experiments, 1960s to 1970s. Reason for choosing. This disturbing chapter in medical history sheds light on the complexities of psychiatric treatment and underscores the importance of ethical considerations in experimental research. Setting the stage. In the heart of Texas during the 1960s and 1970s, a controversial psychiatric treatment gained traction: electroconvulsive therapy, ECT. While initially hailed as a breakthrough in mental health care, its implementation in experimental trials raised ethical concerns and sparked public outrage. Players in the game. A. Psychiatric researchers, advocates of electroconvulsive therapy who conducted experimental trials to assess its efficacy in treating various mental disorders. B. Patients, individuals suffering from psychiatric illnesses, often institutionalized and subjected to ECT without fully understanding the potential risks and consequences. C. Advocacy groups, organizations dedicated to protecting the rights of psychiatric patients and advocating for ethical treatment practices. Unraveling the scheme. Experimental trials of electroconvulsive therapy in Texas involved administering electric shocks to patients' brains under controlled conditions, purportedly to alleviate symptoms of depression, schizophrenia, and other mental disorders. However, the procedures often resulted in severe side effects, including memory loss, cognitive impairment, and emotional trauma. Despite mounting evidence of the harmful effects of ECT and growing opposition from advocacy groups, the experiments continued, fueled by the belief in its therapeutic potential and the pursuit of scientific advancement.
Reflections on history. These experiments highlight the tough ethical choices in medical research and psychiatric care. They show why it's critical to carefully watch over studies and make sure people understand and agree to take part, especially when they're vulnerable.
Third story. The Oregon Sterilization Program. 1907 to 1981. Reason for choosing. This harrowing tale of state-sanctioned sterilization exposes the dark underbelly of eugenics ideology and prompts reflection on the ethical implications of government intervention in reproductive rights and bodily autonomy. Setting the stage. In the progressive era of the early 20th century, Oregon emerged as a pioneer in eugenics-inspired policies aimed at improving societal health and genetic fitness. Under the guise of public welfare and social reform, the state implemented a controversial sterilization program targeting individuals deemed unfit for reproduction, leaving a lasting legacy of injustice and oppression. Players in the game. A. Eugenics advocates and reformers promoted the ideology of eugenics, advocating for policies aimed at controlling human reproduction to eliminate perceived hereditary defects and improve the genetic quality of the population. B. State legislators and authorities enacted laws authorizing involuntary sterilization of individuals deemed feeble-minded, mentally deficient, or otherwise unfit for parenthood, based on subjective criteria determined by eugenicists. C. Institutionalized individuals, vulnerable populations confined to state institutions, including individuals with developmental disabilities, mental illnesses, and behavioral disorders, subjected to involuntary sterilization without their consent or understanding of the procedure's consequences. Unraveling the scheme. The Oregon Sterilization Program operated for over 7 decades, systematically sterilizing thousands of individuals deemed unfit for parenthood or deemed a burden to society. Procedures were often carried out without due process or judicial oversight, depriving individuals of their reproductive rights and perpetuating systemic discrimination against marginalized communities. Despite growing opposition to eugenics and sterilization laws in the latter half of the 20th century, Oregon remained steadfast in its commitment to eugenic principles, continuing involuntary sterilization practices until 1981.
Reflections on history. This sterilization program highlights how eugenics has harmed marginalized groups, stressing the need to protect people's rights to have children and to ensure fairness and equality in healthcare policies.
Fourth story. The Louisiana lobotomy scandal. 1940s to 1960s. Reason for choosing. This disturbing chapter in medical history sheds light on the consequences of unchecked medical experimentation and highlights the need for ethical guidelines in psychiatric treatment. Setting the stage. Amidst the sweltering heat of Louisiana, a scandal of horrific proportions unfolded within the walls of psychiatric institutions. The practice of lobotomy, hailed as a miracle cure for mental illness, revealed its devastating consequences on unsuspecting patients. Players in the game. A. Dr. Walter J. Freeman, a prominent proponent of lobotomy, whose fervent advocacy contributed to its widespread use in psychiatric treatment. D. Psychiatric institutions, facilities throughout Louisiana where lobotomies were performed on patients deemed mentally ill or unruly. C. Patients, individuals subjected to lobotomy procedures, often without fully understanding the irreversible effects on their mental faculties. Unraveling the scheme. Lobotomy procedures, which involved the surgical alteration of the brain's frontal lobe, were touted as a solution to a range of psychiatric disorders, from depression to schizophrenia. However, the procedure often resulted in severe cognitive impairment, leaving patients incapacitated and devoid of personality. Despite mounting evidence of the procedure's harmful effects and growing opposition from within the medical community, lobotomies continued to be performed with alarming frequency in Louisiana psychiatric institutions.
Reflections on history. The lobotomy scandal serves as a grim testament to the dangers of unchecked medical intervention and the exploitation of vulnerable populations in the name of treatment. It underscores the importance of evidence based practices and ethical considerations in the field of psychiatry.
Fifth story. The Wyoming Mind Control Experiments. The late 1950s to the early 1970s. Reason for choosing. This tale explores the dark and ethically dubious realm of mind control experimentation, raising questions about the limits of scientific inquiry and the importance of safeguarding human rights. Setting the stage. Deep within the remote wilderness of Wyoming, in the midst of the Cold War era, shadowy government operatives embark on a clandestine project known as Operation Mindgate. Their goal? To unlock the secrets of human consciousness and harness the power of mind control for military advantage. Players in the game. A. Government agencies, top-secret organizations behind Operation Mindgate, operating with impunity and secrecy. B. Dr. Elizabeth Monroe, the brilliant but morally conflicted scientist recruited to lead the experiments, torn between her pursuit of scientific discovery and her ethical principles. C. Unwitting subjects, innocent civilians unwittingly drawn into the web of mind control experimentation, their minds manipulated, and their autonomy stripped away. Unraveling the scheme. Under the guise of psychological research, Dr. Monroe and her team subject unsuspecting individuals to a barrage of psychological manipulation techniques, from hypnosis to sensory deprivation. As the experiments progress, the subjects' minds become increasingly fractured, their thoughts and actions manipulated at the whim of their unseen puppeteers. Despite growing unease among the research team and whispers of dissent, Operation Mindgate presses on, its architects blinded by visions of power and control.
Reflections on history. The Wyoming mind control experiments warn against government overreach and unethical experimentation on people without their consent. They remind us to consider the boundaries of scientific research and the importance of respecting individual autonomy. Thanks for joining us on this spine tingling journey through some of the creepiest medical practices in U.S. history. Did you manage to figure out which story was the fictional one? If you guessed the Wyoming mind control experiments, give yourself a pat on the back. You're the winner. And if we managed to fool you, no worries. There's plenty more later. If you enjoyed our video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more eerie tales.